Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Submarine Stories. We're rigged for red. Let's get right into it. About 1985, I transferred to the USS Will Rogers. SSBN 659, I went to the Gold Crew. We were a combined crew. We were in the shipyard in Newport News. And you've heard some of the tales from there before, at least one, where we all ran up to the casino in Atlantic City and had some fun. But this is more a story about one guy and his exploits. And to protect the innocent and the guilty, we'll just call this guy Walter. And Walter was quite a card. He was everything that you ever expect a submarine guy to be. He was eccentric and unique and funny in his own way, and just, man, he's just one of those guys. So let me tell you a couple of Walter stories, and we'll see if we get the whole thing in, or we need to split this into a couple or two or three or five episodes, because there's quite a bit of Walter story to tell. So let's start out with he gets to the boat, and he's an E6, and he's going to be the LPO on the Gold Crew. So I'm going to be working for Walter. At that time I was an E5, and we hit it off right away. Walter was a nice guy. He was a 2 rum and cokes every night at Chili's kind of guy, and he would say to me, "Patrick, every night I go to Chili's and they get me a rum and coke. They know what I like." And we would go to Chili's a couple of times, and he'd walk down, and this girl would come up to him at the bar. She wouldn't say a word to him, and she would just sat down a rum and coke, and she'd walk away and says, "See, she loves me." And I was like, "Well, Walter, I don't think that's love. That's just knowing what you like to drink, buddy." And he's like, No, really, she loves me. Let me call her over." And he'd say, like, "Hey, Janice, come here. Tell him what I like to drink." "You like rum and coke, Walter." And he'd say, "See, she loves me." And it's like, hey, whatever works for you, buddy. But anyway, he pretty much did that every night that he was off. He'd go over to Chili's, have a couple rum and cokes, have something to eat. He just loved that place. Anyway, I might have mentioned that Walter's a little eccentric. So the first part of the story is we're in the shipyard, and we all live in Huntington Hall, and the boat's getting ready to split crews in a month or so, and we ended up getting a little delayed, and things lasted a little longer in Virginia than we thought they were going to. But so one day we're at Huntington Hall, and the Treasury Department people show up, and there's a couple of agents, and those guys always come. There's always more than one of them. If NCIS shows up, or Treasury shows up, or IRS shows up, whenever they come, they bring a couple people with them. So anyway, they got together, and they asked for Walter, and they asked for the captain, and they had a little meeting. And the next thing you know, we're hearing all about this from Walter. "These guys, they don't like the fact that I don't cash all my paychecks right away." And so they brought him back to his room, and he's gone back there, and he's opened up a strong box in his room, and he's got like a little folder thing in that's the size of checks, and he's got like a dozen paychecks in this folder. And it turns out Walter's system is he gets a check, he puts it in there, and he goes back and he cashes the oldest one he has if he needs some money. If he doesn't need any money, he doesn't cash a check. And it turns out that he doesn't have a bank account, and I guess that goes back to religious practices, religious beliefs with his family. They were Dutch reformist, as I recall, and it's a religious sect that they don't encourage people to have televisions in their homes. They certainly did not agree with the consumption of alcohol, and that didn't seem to bother Walter very much. But they weren't up on a lot of social norms, and one of the things that they didn't particularly care for was modern day banking and things that were along the modern lines. So Walter didn't have an ATM card. He didn't believe in it. He carried cash, and when he needed money, like I said, he'd go to the bank, he'd cash a check. Or he'd go to the credit union, or he'd go to the tender, to the paymaster, and he'd cash a check. So they showed up, and he had some checks, I guess, that were well over a year old, maybe some of them as much as 2 years old. And they went to the captain, and they decided that Walter needed to have a bank account. So Walter wasn't happy about that, and he was there, and he had a long discussion with the captain. He came back and he says, "These shitters, they want me to get a bank account. They're going to make me do this. Can they make me do this, Patrick?" And I was like, "Walter, I guess so. I don't know." I said, "Man, you don't have a bank account?" He said, "What do I need a bank for? I have money. I pay cash for things. When I want to buy something, I use cash." And I was like, "Well, I guess that works if it works." But so they took him across the street to the First Federal Bank, and it was the bank that had a thing with the Navy, because we were at the shipyard, and they were right across the street from Huntington Hall, and they cashed all the paychecks. So there'd be a line out this place, for people to cash their checks and everything on payday. But that never really affected Walter, because he didn't need to cash a check on payday because he had money, and he had, a dozen or so checks, maybe even more, in his little wallet thing that he kept in his strongbox. And I said to him one time, I said, "Walter, don't you get worried about carrying that much cash if you're going to do something?" "Oh no, Patrick, I have a 41 Magnum." And he pulls out his gun, right? He carried this gun with him everywhere like a lunatic, But I have a 41 Magnum. 41 Magnum? What the hell is that? He said, "It's a Ruger. It's a 6-shot. I got a 4 3/4 inch barrel 41 Magnum." He said, "Let me tell you why." And Walter was more than happy to tell me why. "A 357 could bounce off a windshield, and a 44 is too big for my dainty little hands. So I got the 41 Magnum. It has all the penetrating power that I need, and it fits my hand just perfectly. And I put Beckmeyer grips on it. I can shoot." And Walter was a good shot. I'll give him that. He was into guns. He liked guns, and we'll talk some more about that. But he had this 41 Magnum, and he carried it around with him, Everywhere he went, he carried it in a little holster inside his jacket, and, people had no idea that it was there. And I don't know if he had a concealed carry permit. People weren't, maybe so much worrying about all that back then. But he carried it with him everywhere when he wasn't in uniform. His 41 Magnum. So anyway, they made Walter put all of his checks in the bank, and the captain went with him. It was Big Al Kalupka was the CO then. And Al took him over there and explained the whole thing to him, and got him to a loan officer, and they established a bank account and did the whole thing. And he was getting an ATM card. And, "Hey, Patrick, did you know you can just go down and use this card and take money right off the street? You can just go there and get money." I said, "Yeah, Walter, the whole world uses an ATM card now." This is back in 1985. It was relatively new technology, but it had been around for a while, and Walter just hadn't grasped into that concept just yet. But he was now. So anyway, there we are, Walter. I'm in the bank, and they made me do this. And anyway, so because this could only happen to Walter, about 3 weeks later, the bank failed. The First Federal Bank of Virginia, or Hampton Roads, or wherever the hell they were, failed. They found that they were taking money out and had some slick deal where they were going to the Bahamas and taking hookers with them and all kinds of stuff, the bank officers. And you can't make this story up. You can go look. In 1985, the bank failed in Virginia, and it was bought up by Sovereign, and it became Sovereign Bank. Well, for about 3 or 4 days, you couldn't get your money out of First Federal Bank because they were going through this big investigation, and the whole thing hit. It was an FDIC case, and Walter lost his fucking mind. "They took my money. They got it in the bank. They won't give me my money back. They're going to go." And so he went to the CO. "You promised me I'd be able to get my money. And those shitters, they got my money, and they won't let me have my money." And the captain tried to explain to him, it's just a thing. I can't get my money. You can't get your money. It's not. It's just what it is. What it is. It's just a couple of days. "All bullshit. You told me I could take my money out of that bank anytime I wanted, and now the bank is closed." And like I said, this could only happen to Walter. He's 3 weeks into the new banking thing that he's never done before, and he can't get his money out. And he was pissed. So they got through that. Sovereign Bank. They issued new cards. Everybody's got new identification. You can go there and cash your bank. Now, normal people, I say normal people, I didn't have that problem. I spent all of my paycheck, every paycheck I got it, and there just wasn't a whole lot left, and it just didn't affect me much because it happened like in the middle of a payday, and it's kind of like, okay, well, hey, go down there and cash my next check, and no big deal. And I use Navy Federal anyway, but so it didn't affect me much. But there wasn't really direct deposit. You either cashed your check on the tender, or you cashed your check at a bank, and then you did whatever you did with your money, and it just, things seemed different then. And it was, everybody took cash, and you needed cash, and we're not really there anymore. You use debit card for almost everything. But about, I don't know, maybe a month and a half later, just to add insult to injury, Walter, we were moving, and it was time to go, and we were moving, and it was like a Thursday morning, and it was a light rain, and just one of those Virginia gray hazy days, gray and Norfolk, it all kind of went together. So we were getting ready to leave, and we had rented a U-Haul truck, the three of us together, me, him, and Jesus Arzola, the other guy that worked with us. And we had Jesus's bike in the back of the truck, and we had a tow hitch on the back, and we were going to tow my Jeep, and we were going to go up there, and Walter had a Camaro, and he was driving. He's like, we're going to run in tandem. He was going to lead the way, and we're going to follow him up, and we're going to go. So the last thing to do as we moved out of Huntington Hall, we're all checked out, it's time to go. Walter walks across the street to Sovereign Bank, and he writes him a check for his balance, and it's like $22,000 or some shit. It was over 20 grand. So he writes him a check, passes him a check, and says, okay, I want my money. And they say, no, that's not how this works. That's too much money. And Walter says, what the hell do you mean you're not going to give me my money? So he loses his shit again, and he calls the captain at his house, and by now we're split crews, so now he's got Gil Wolverton. Captain Kalupka told me I'd be able to get my money, and he fucking lied to me, and those shitters won't give me my money. And so Gil Wolverton shows up, and he's talking to the bank people, and they're like, well, we'll give him like $2,000, and we'll give him a cashier's check for the rest, and he can just deposit it to the next place he's going. He's going to be up there in a couple days, but we don't have $20,000 that we can just give. It's against the law for us to get. Against the law? What do you mean it's against the law to give me my money? You told me I'd be able to get my money. Captain Kalupka promised me I'd be able to get my money out of this bank anytime I wanted, and here I am, and you told me, dude, and he's pointing to the manager of the bank, you told me I could have my money anytime I wanted my money. Now you won't give me my money. So Walter's freaking out, and it got to be kind of a big deal because Walter's jacket kind of popped open a little bit, and there was his little 41 Magnum. So they escorted Walter outside because he had his gun, and he was like, I'm getting ready to travel. What do you think I'm going to do with my gun, you dumbasses? Oh, what kind of stupid people are you? Nobody takes out $20,000 and doesn't have a gun. Anyway. So they finally get this right. They write him a cashier's check. They gave him, however much money that they could give him, and he come out and he's got a big wad of money in an envelope, and he's got tucked in his jacket. And he says, Patrick, I got my 41 Magnum, but those shitters didn't want to give me my money. They all fucking lied to me. And it's like, Walter, sometimes you just got to play the game, buddy. How do I know that this check's any good? This could bounce. This bank already crashed once. What are they doing to me? So, anyway, and then we drove up to Connecticut, and another money story that goes with this. He decided that he wanted to buy a new Camaro, and he had this old blue Camaro, and I say old, it was probably 6 years old, 7 years old, and we went to the Chrysler dealer up there, and they had a Camaro that was on the lot that was, I don't know, it couldn't have been more than 6 months old, but he saw this Camaro driving by, and he went in there and he talked to the guy, and they started haggling about price and trade-in and all this kind of stuff. And Walter says to the guy, says, well, is there a better deal if I... And the guy's like trying to explain financing to Walter. And Walter says, now, wait a minute. You want me to pay how much on this? And Walter's kind of sitting there, and he pulls out his calculator. He's got like one of these T165 calculators, And he says, now, wait a minute. I would be paying an extra $3,000 for this car if I took your deal and paid on 4 years. What the hell's that? Are you trying to steal from me? And the guy's like, no, that's how financing works. He says, oh, no, bullshit, I pay cash. And the guy's like, oh, pay cash. He said, well, I'll give you this kind of deal, and the price comes down. He said, so people really do this? And he comes to me, he says, Patrick, did you know that people pay extra money so that they can borrow money from the car dealer? What kind of an idiot borrows money from the car dealer? And he says, did you see the interest rate on that? He said, they tried to charge me an extra $3,000. They thought they had a fish on the hook. They thought they could see me coming and going. I'm not going to spend all that extra money. He says, who the hell doesn't pay cash for a car? And it's like, well, hey, Walter, I don't know how to tell you this, buddy, but 99% of the free world doesn't just walk in and pay cash for a car. Not everybody's hooked up quite the way you are. So anyway, it's time to go get the car. It's the next day. I don't think anything about it. Walter says, hey, can you give me a ride over there? We're going to get my car, and I'm going to... Anyway, so we dropped his Camaro off the day before, and so he's without a car for the night. And we went to Chili's, and he had 2 rum and cokes. And anyway, so the next day, I got him in my Jeep, and I take him over to the Chrysler dealer there in New London. And he's got a little gym bag, and I didn't think anything about it. He walks in, he's got like $16,000 in cash in his gym bag. And the guy's like, okay, we're ready to do this. He says, you got a check for me? And Walter's like, a check? I told you I was paying cash. I got the money right here. And he opens up the gym bag, and this guy was like the son of the guy that owned the dealership. And he kind of looked at me, and he looked back, and he looked over at another guy. He says, this guy brought cash. Walter says, of course I brought cash. That's what the deal was for. We're going to do this in cash. He says, what kind of a dumbass are you anyway? He said, I told you I was bringing cash. He said, I got my 41 Magnum right here, and I'm going to... Oh, and here we go with the gun again. So, anyway, Walter drives out, and this is a burnt orange Camaro. It's about 6 months old, and it was... I got to give it to him. This was a beautiful car. It had everything that you could possibly put into a 1985 or 86, whatever year it was, Camaro. This car was shit hot. It had T-tops. It was all that. And good for you, Walter. That was a great car for you. But anyway, those were Walter's financial stories and his 41 Magnum. And one other story about the guns before we wrap this up, because I see we're coming up on 20 minutes. We were at A&P Arms in Virginia. And we had gone to the one that was in Portsmouth. It was kind of near where we were. And Walter wanted to do something special for his father and his brother. And he wanted to go hunting. And they were going to go deer hunting that year. So he had a little extra cash. Walter was a little flush with cash. And we were in A&P Arms. And he's in there, and he wanted to buy this Mossberg Mark V. No, not Mossberg. It was a Weatherby. I take that. It was a Weatherby. A Weatherby Mark V rifle. And he ended up getting 3 of them, and he's talking to the guy. He says, would you have 2 more of those? And the guy's like, well, not at this store, but I could have them brought over. And he says, yeah. He says, I'm going to want you to do that because I'd really like to have It turns out he got 3 not Mossberg, they're Weatherby Mark V 30-06s with consecutive serial numbers, which, you know, that's almost impossible. But he ended up with 3 of these. He got nice scopes for him, and he gave one to his dad for Christmas. He gave one to his brother for Christmas, and he had one. But we're in there, and it's the same thing. The guy's like, well, how are you going to pay for this? And Walter says, well, I got cash. And the guy's like, you mean cash? Cash? And Walter's like, yeah, I pay for everything in cash. He says, I don't write none of those bullshit checks. I don't do none of that. He says, I tell you I'm bringing cash. I'll bring you a stack of $100 bills. We'll just pay for this. And these rifles are like $1,500 a piece. And this guy's just like, you know, he's dancing. And he kind of leans over, and we're looking around in the store, and this is like the Kmart of guns, man. They have everything. And we're looking around, and it's like kids in a candy store, a bunch of Torpedoman in a gun store. And we're looking around, and Walter kind of yells across from 3 aisles over, hey, Patrick, check it out. I'm going to buy 3 rifles from this guy, and he's not going to charge me tax because I'm paying cash. And this guy's like, no, don't say that. What the hell's wrong with you? And he's looking around, and he's like, are you an IRS agent? Do you work for the government? And Walter's like, yeah, I work for the government. And they're like, no, Walter, that's not what he means. And the guy's like, oh, of course I'm going to charge you tax. He said, no, you told me you weren't going to charge me tax. What the hell's wrong with you? You're trying to cheat me. And it's like, goes through this whole thing. Walter's in the Navy. it's not exactly the government. The guy's like, and he's like, but just keep that down. Don't. He says, yeah, what a great deal. The guy's not going to charge me tax because, I'm paying the cash. And it's like, anyway. So that's my Walter story for today. That's their submarine stories for today. I hope you have a great Navy day. I hope you enjoyed the tale. And there's more to come because, my oh my, we had some fun with Walter. Thank you very much. And please like and share and tell your friends about these videos. And go ahead and subscribe to my page too if you would. It would really help out. Thanks and have a great day.